Hi, and welcome back to Mary Trump Live. I'm Brian Karam, sitting in for Mary, who's in D.C. with us tonight for the State of the Union address. So, tonight, Donald Trump will give the State of the Union to a joint session of Congress, and those on the inside say there might be one or two surprises, but they also say you should expect a long stump speech as he tries to defend his falling poll numbers, fake polls, his falling popularity, fake press, and the recent rebuke from the U.S. Supreme Court that amounted to a bench slapping. In other words, it's a typical day in the land of Donald Trump. So, hey, let's dive in. All right, so coming up at 9 o'clock tonight, Donald Trump is set to deliver his 2026 State of the Union address, and it comes at a very politically tense moment. Always with Donald, it's tense. He comes into this speech facing weak approval numbers, economic frustration from voters over rising costs. You got middle-class members of the middle class who are having to sell their blood to make ends meet. So, He also has recent legal setbacks, including a Supreme Court decision striking down major parts of his tariff strategy. And according to Reuters, Trump will attempt, quote, to sell his turbulent, norm-breaking second term to American voters who will decide in November whether his Republican Party retains control of Congress. That's right. This is going to tip off. This begins the midterm election process. The address also lands during heightened foreign policy tensions, adding to the pressure as he speaks before a divided Congress. Some of them in Congress have invited survivors of convicted sex offender and former Trump BFF Jeffrey Epstein to attend. It was just a couple of weeks ago that Attorney General Pam Bondi refused to acknowledge the presence of Epstein survivors before a House Judiciary Committee hearing, even though they stood directly behind her. Do you think Donald will acknowledge them tonight? Fair question, and it's probably unlikely. CBS News reports that dozens of Democrats plan to skip this year's State of the Union, choosing organized alternative events, like one I'll be at, instead of staging visible protests inside the House chamber. The shift comes after last year's disruptions when Congressman Al Green of Texas was removed from the chamber for shouting during Donald's address. Other Democrats at that time protested by displaying little signs, wearing message-driven clothing, and some even walked out mid-speech to little or no effect. This year, party leaders appear to be steering members toward a more coordinated and, I would guess, professional approach. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries said Democrats could either attend and register what he called silent defiance or stay away entirely as a statement in and of itself. Several lawmakers are expected to take part in a separate event on the National Mall titled the People's State of the Union, including Senators Ed Markey, Jeff Merkley, Chris Murphy, Tina Smith, and Chris Van Hollen, along with representatives Pramila Jayapal, among others. Still, other Democrats are also hosting yet another event in the National Press Club. That's where I'll be, titled the State of the Swamp. Senator Ron Wyden plans to attend alongside Representatives Seth Moulton, Dan Goldman, and Eugene Vindman. And, of course, Robert De Niro will be the keynote speaker at that event. That will be, I'm going to say that's the event to be at. Come and join us at that one. We'll have a lot of fun and a little bit of humor because, you know, after all, you got to laugh or cry. We'll be here all week. Try the veal. Meanwhile, how are things looking for Donald Trump going into his big speech tonight? According to a new Reuters poll conducted during the last 6 days and concluding yesterday, 61% of Americans say Donald Trump has, quote, become erratic with age. That includes 89% of Democrats, 64% of independents, and 30% of Republicans. The poll wraps up only one day before the 79-year-old president prepares to deliver his annual address, which I'm told he was still writing as of today, following a month marked by angry reprimands of lawmakers and judges. And can I just say 61% say he's become erratic with age? He's been erratic as long as I know him. Just ask Miles. Miles is in the house. The poll wraps up. Okay, hey, we'll stop here. Say hi.
He's been erratic. It's true. He's been erratic.
There you go. Responding to numerous questions from reporters in the last few days, the White House deflected from the question about Trump's polling numbers and issued a statement this afternoon saying that the, quote, radical left will attempt to undermine the president in their rebuttal and that they love violent, illegal criminal aliens. Donald's overall approval rating has changed little in recent months. It's been down. 40% of respondents approve of his performance. That's up 2 points from earlier this month, but he began his term at 47%, and his approval has remained within a point or two of its current level since April. Trump is the oldest president ever to be inaugurated, and he has rolled out very unpopular policies at a rapid pace, including sweeping tariffs on imports from dozens of countries, as well as deploying masked federal agents nationwide to crack down on so-called unauthorized immigration. We won't even go into that. He has frequently struck an angry tone in public remarks, saying last week he was, quote, absolutely ashamed after the conservative-leaning U.S. Supreme Court struck down many of his tariffs as illegal. He also called those who filed the suit to curb his tariff efforts sleazebags. He later reinstated new tariffs under a different and questionable legal authority. I'll remind everyone, Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution gives sole authority to levies, tariffs, etc., and taxes to Congress. In November, Trump assailed Democratic lawmakers who urged military members to refuse illegal orders, calling them traitors who would face execution. Ginny Imperial dropped charges against them yesterday after another failed attempt to secure an indictment. None of this helps out the public's perception that Trump is out of touch or too old for the job, not to mention completely and outright incompetent. Well, yeah, that's absolutely true. All of what you said, but the absolutely ashamed part of it and sleazebags and different tariffs, Donald Trump's his playing to the fact he was asked, if you want these tariffs, why don't you work with Congress? Donald Trump's reaction, he didn't have to. He can do anything he wants. No. The founders of our democracy separated power so you couldn't do whatever you want, so we wouldn't have a monarch. That's why we formed our Constitution. Donald Trump conveniently forgets that. But there's even more bad news for Donald. In a new CNN poll, just this week, his numbers with independents are absolutely cratering. Go figure. With more of that on the story, let's check with Harry Hinton. Take a look at this clip.
Talking about the lowest Trump has ever been going into the State of the Union, the lowest that any president has been this century going into a State of the Union at this point in their presidency. It is also the weakest that Donald Trump has ever been with independents. Look at this drop. We've been talking about it the past few months. At this point, a year ago, Donald Trump was at minus 13 points. Look at this. Minus 47 points among independents, the lowest Donald Trump has ever been in either of his two terms as president with independents. That is driving these numbers. When you're 47 points underwater with independents, that's the name of the game. You can't be above water overall, and that's why Donald Trump is near record lows overall and the lowest he's ever been going into a State of the Union address.
And why do you think that is? Could it be because he keeps telling us this? Well, wait a minute. It's not $1.99 a gallon now. He told us today or yesterday in the White House that it's $1.85 a gallon. He cannot tell the truth, and people know it. Anyway, there will be several Epstein survivors at tonight's State of the Union, invited there from various Democrats. This afternoon, CNN's Manu Raju spoke to the man without a jacket, Ohio Republican Jim Jordan, about the administration's serious concerns for the well-being of Epstein survivors. It's well known that Jordan, of course, has repeatedly presented himself as someone who stands firmly with abuse victims and takes their concerns very seriously. Of course, that's not true, but if you need information on Jordan's background with abuse victims, a simple Google search will tell you all you need to know. But let's hear what he had to say.
The speech tonight, a number of Democratic members are bringing in survivors, Jeffrey Epstein survivors, as their guests. Some of those survivors have asked President Trump for a meeting, to meet with them. Should the president meet with them?
I leave that up to the White House.
But would it be a good idea in your view?
Everyone knows that the president didn't do anything wrong, because if he had, you don't think the Garland Justice Department and the Biden administration would have brought something up? I mean, everyone knows he didn't do anything wrong here. Our Justice Department is complying with the legislation we passed and with the courts and getting that information out there as the law requires and as the courts have required, making sure you protect people who should be protected, but getting the information to Congress as it said in the law we passed.
No, we don't know what Donald Trump did. And Donald Trump has been mentioned more times in the Epstein files than God is mentioned in the Bible or Harry Potter in the Harry Potter books. Take your choice. And the fact of the matter is we still have kept millions of those documents from being released. So no, we don't know. We really don't. And the fact of the matter is, sure, if Biden had known it, would he have prosecuted? Maybe. But what we're seeing out of the Epstein files is that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And then there's Prince Andrew. Anyway, earlier today, MS Now spoke to Epstein victim Virginia Giuffre's brother, and here's what he had to say.
Sky, we have seen this administration literally say, we're moving on from Epstein. They say all the files that they're going to release have been released. We saw Republican lawmakers actually praise Attorney General Pam Bondi when she was on the Hill. Are you hopeful being there in Washington can keep the pressure on? What do you see as the next step, Sky?
Well, I think they might be ready to move on, but the rest of the world is not ready to move on. So if anybody wants to move on, he can move on himself. But we're not moving on from any of this. I think what we hope to see next here is real accountability. I mean, we're seeing some of that in the UK right now. We're seeing Andrew being arrested. We're seeing Peter Mandelson being arrested. What about us? What about here in the United States? We are continuing to lag behind. And thank God we have people like Representative Suhas here that want to continue like the fight with us, because without people like him, we wouldn't be here. I mean, truthfully. So we have to keep this story alive. I have to believe that the general public out there, your mothers, your sisters, your daughters, I mean, we care about this, right? Like, this is about affecting our next generation. What are we going to leave this world to? What example are we going to set moving forward? So that's what we're fighting for right now.
Yeah, what they're fighting for is what Thomas Massie, the Republican, said. He doesn't want to favor pedophiles. No, we can't move on from this. Donald Trump says what he says is not move on, but he says we're going to turn the page. Don, you're on that page too. So we're not turning the page until there's some accountability. That's how crime works. You don't get to you don't get to rob someone or rape someone or kill someone and say, that's over with, move on. No, there has to be accountability. Then you move on. And there may actually be a lot more to the Epstein story yet. The Telegraph out of the United Kingdom is reporting that the convicted sex offender Epstein hid computers and photographs from authorities and rented storage units all across the United States. Notice this comes from the Telegraph, not in the United States. Documents obtained by the paper show he paid private detectives to remove electronic equipment from his Florida home, apparently to keep it from investigators, you think? Anyway, financial records indicate he rented 6 storage units nationwide, storing property from multiple residents, including computers from his private island, Epstein Island, in the Caribbean. At least one lease dates back to 2003, when he was part of a Florida social circle that included, you guessed it, Donald Trump. Search warrants reviewed by the Telegraph suggest federal authorities never searched the lockers, raising the possibility they contained previously unseen material linked to Epstein and associates such as Prince Andrew and Lord Mandelson. Though Epstein has long been suspected of keeping compromising material, relatively little has surfaced publicly, and there's a reason for that. It's fueled claims that the U.S. Justice Department is shielding powerful figures, a claim officials have denied for years. The DOJ emails that were released, combined with a storage record, raised the possibility the lockers housed such material. And at the time of his death, Epstein owned 5 large properties in the U.S. and France. Photos taken during 2019 raids showed significant storage space and empty basements. Earlier this month, the Telegraph reported he ordered hidden cameras placed inside tissue boxes after a contact said, quote, the Russians may come in handy. The documents also show that they apparently were tipped off about a mid-2000s police search. Epstein directed private investigators to move computers into another lockup and access a separate secret unit in New York. Well, guess what? Staff also discussed transferring computers and CDs from his U.S. Virgin Islands property into hidden storage. Material in those units could predate the earliest batch of Epstein emails released by the government, which began around 2009. Look, all of this is a long way of saying that Epstein valued his rich clientele because he was going to hold them hostage if anything ever happened to him, and he was afraid that something would. But this also highlights one of the biggest facts we need to take away from the Epstein investigation is that the Department of Justice, for many administrations, has been incompetent. If they left all of this uninvestigated, what the hell were they doing? There was an awful lot of material, and they should have gone through it more thoroughly than they did. And the reports they gave to previous presidents obviously was lacking material needed to make cogent decisions. But there's more news now of Republicans covering for sexual predators in order to preserve their power. Epstein ain't an isolated subject, folks. Let's take a look at this. The New York Times reported yesterday that Representative Tony Gonzalez, a Republican who represents, let me get this right, Texans from west of San Antonio all the way west to like El Paso. It's huge. He's under increasing pressure to resign following allegations that he pressured a staff member into a sexual relationship. The staff member later died by suicide. Bobby Barrera, an attorney for the staff member's husband, said he reviewed text messages in which Gonzalez sent sexually explicit messages and continued pursuing her after she expressed discomfort. According to Barrera, the texts include the staffer telling the congressman she did not believe the situation was appropriate, yet he allegedly continued urging her to engage in sexual exchanges. Jesus, Mary and Joseph. Screenshots and detailed descriptions of the messages were published Monday, including from the San Antonio Express News, the last newspaper standing in San Antonio. In response, members of Congress from both parties called on Gonzalez to resign. He'd probably be prosecuted. A spokesperson for Gonzalez did not respond to requests for comment. But Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, a man of godly ideals and family values, was asked about the controversy yesterday on the Hill. And here's how he responded.
Mr. Speaker, why should Tony Gonzalez resign given these very serious accusations?
There are serious accusations, and it must be taken seriously. And I've told him he's got to address that with his constituents, and he's in the process of doing that. Is my understanding. There's an investigation in the state of Texas on these matters, and has been going for some time. And the Office of Congressional Conduct has also, it's been reported. They've been looking at it. And all of that was news to me. But I think, as in every case like this, you have to allow the investigations to play out and all the facts to come out. I've been intellectually consistent about this. Whether you're talking about Republicans or Democrats, you have to let the system play out. If someone, I was against, for example, the expulsion of George Santos a while back because he had been accused of a crime and indicted but not found guilty. If the accusation of something is going to be the litmus test for someone being able to continue to serve in the House, you'll have a lot of people who would have to resign or be removed or expelled from Congress. So I think you've got to allow this to play out. I think it is very serious. The allegations are clearly very serious. And Tony Gonzalez will address it. I think he will.
Does he deserve to win re-election? Does he deserve to win re-election?
See you later, guys.
A very professional and moderated response, but he lies. If there's a Democrat who's accused of anything, he is among the first to call for them to leave or resign office. And in fact, many Republicans often jump the gun. Yes, you should investigate. Yes, we should reserve judgment until there is a definitive decision made. But in this case, Mike Johnson is simply lying. Even Lauren Boebert, of all people, is calling for Gonzalez to resign. But man of God, Mike Johnson seems to stand firmly on the side of the sexual predators and the preservation of power of the Republican Party. And you wonder why he's doing this? Because there's such a slim majority in the House, and they're probably going to lose it come November. Anyway, yesterday, a former ICE training lawyer, Ryan Schwank, testified before congressional Democrats that the agency's training program for new deportation officers is deficient, defective, and broken. No shit. Alleging that critical Coursework, exam, and use of force simulations have been cut as the agency rapidly expands staffing for mass deportation. Here's Schwank, who recently resigned after 5 years with ICE, giving his opening statement.
I am here because I am duty-bound to report the legally required training program at the ICE Academy is deficient, defective, and broken. 5 months ago, I was asked to teach the law to new cadets at the ICE Academy in Glencoe, Georgia, where ICE is training its new, inexperienced recruits. I volunteered, those without law enforcement training, I volunteered to take on this assignment based on my experience in law enforcement oversight, including at the state and local level prior to my work with ICE. On my first day, I received secretive orders to teach new cadets to violate the Constitution by entering homes without a judicial warrant. For the last 5 months, I watched ICE dismantle the training program, cutting 240 hours of vital classes from a 584-hour program. Classes that teach the Constitution, our legal system, firearms training, the use of force, lawful arrests, proper detention, and the limits of officers' authority. For example, they ceased all of the legal instructions regarding use of force. This means that cadets are not taught what it means to be objectively reasonable, the very standard which the law requires them to meet when deciding whether or not to use deadly force.
Well, DHS denied the allegations, stating that the training has been streamlined, not reduced. Well, that's the very definition of reduced, and still includes firearm instruction, de-escalation tactics, and constitutional law. BS. And you don't have to do a lot of investigation into this. Just listen to what Stephen Miller said. Remember, he came out and said that ICE officers can operate with impunity and immunity. And it's obvious that they believe that by the way they operate. Opening fire in a crowded area, shooting someone in the back multiple times, all of this, and then leaving the scene after a shooting, all of this shows that they're not being trained properly, and there isn't a law enforcement agency that I've ever covered of the dozens that I have that would find any of that professional. Schwank was right, and so we'll see what happens, but not much will happen as long as the leaders of DHS, and particularly Stephen Miller, keeps waving their bat around. In Paris today, U.S. Ambassador to France, Charles Kushner, that's Jared Kushner's father, made a questionable move to defuse a diplomatic dispute after skipping a formal summons from the French government. France had called Kushner in over Trump regime posts on X, claiming that, quote, violent radical leftism, unquote, was responsible for the death of 23-year-old French student Quentin Duranty, who died after clashes between far-left and far-right activists in Lyon earlier this month. French officials viewed the statement as interference in their internal political affairs. After initially failing to appear at the summons, French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot warned that Kushner's access to French government officials could be restricted. Just more of the same. Our own allies won't share information with us anymore. This is just the latest example of it. Kushner then called Barrot, expressing willingness not to interfere in France's public debate, and the two agreed to meet in the coming days. French officials emphasized that while the no-show was a breach of diplomatic protocol, there's a shock, it would not damage broader U.S.-French relations. But let's be clear what this really is. This is what happens when Donald treats diplomacy like a family business. Instead of appointing seasoned diplomats with deep experience and credibility, installs loyalists and relatives. And this is not just Donald. Many presidents have done it. It's just usually that they're stripped of power and aren't able to do what Donald's people have done because they keep the seasoned professionals on the staff and they advise the diplomats how to do things. But Donald doesn't do that. People whose primary qualification is proximity to power is in statecraft. That's cronyism. That's what Donald does. It's not only embarrassing, it is a bit corrosive. It weakens our leverage abroad. But this is a part, again, of what Donald's entire international relations is about. And that is why the Five Eyes, our closest allies in Europe, have quit sharing important intelligence with us because of our ambassadors are well, not only unpopular and very badly political, but also unprofessional. They have to scramble to clean up our mess. So what can I tell you? Just a reminder, Mary Trump will be moving to 4 p.m. Eastern Time starting Monday, March 2nd. Mark it down in your calendars. Thank you for being patient with MTM as plans are made for this upcoming midterm year. And boy, it's going to be a doozy, isn't it? We'll have new merch dropping this week. We'll keep you posted. We'll be back tomorrow to discuss the State of the Union. I'm going to sit through it tonight, so you please check out our podcast, the Mary Trump Podcast, accessible on all podcast platforms. And I'm going to put in my plug tonight, and here it is, the State of the Swamp. We're going to be here tonight. Robert De Niro is the madcap guy who's going to headline it. I'll speak about an hour before him. And before that, there's a lot of the mayor of Minneapolis and a lot of locals and many congressmen. With that, we've reached today's emotional support moment, and by God, we need it. We're going to attempt to lower your blood pressure with footage of a red panda chewing on leaves. I'm not going to say what kind of leaves they are, but I don't. Anyway, enjoy, have fun, and we'll catch you next time. Love to everybody. I thank you for having me on the show as always, and wish me luck tonight wading through Donald Trump's swamp. Peace out, brothers and sisters.